Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. The Nigerian electricity supply industry has undergone fundamental changes over the past years with the implementation of the government's reform program, reputed to be one of the most ambitious privatization exercises in the global power industry, with a transaction cost of over $3 billion. Now, electricity in Nigeria is generated through thermal and hydropower sources. The main source of electricity generation comes from fossil fuels, especially gas, which accounts for about 86% of the capacity in Nigeria, with the remainder generated from hydropower sources. Now, a lack of liquidity continues to be a significant challenge in the electricity market. The implementation process is currently being reviewed for a cost-effective reflective tariff, while government says it will continue to subsidize power supply to those who are vulnerable in society. Now, closing the meter gap is imperative, and ongoing initiatives, including World Bank programs and the presidential metering initiatives, are gaining momentum as the presidential directive on domestication of power plants by states is beginning to yield results. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will examine questions arising from these fundamental reforms, but that will be after this report from our energy correspondent, Joshua Ojitu.
Nigeria, Africa's largest economy with a growing population, is in dire need of stable electricity supply. With the current supply at about 3,500 megawatts to 4,000 megawatts, industry players describe as inadequate for a country of more than 200 million people. Now, federal government is exploring ways of boosting electricity supply and providing alternative sources of power to bridge the energy gap. There is need to alter the constitution and amend the Electricity Act to open the market for subnationals to participate and ease the burden on the national grid. That was done in 2023, and states are now empowered to legislate, generate, transmit and distribute electricity within their states.
Power as a sector is now under the concurrent legislative list. So all the levels of government must partake. That's the only way we can achieve success and transformation and turnaround for this sector.
Areas for possible collaboration would be in the area of training and also working with them and even providing seat staff where they need staff to begin the business of doing those regulations. So hopefully some of the states very soon will take responsibility for the determination of their tariffs, customer care, investments, licensing, and so on. And we are committed to working with all the states.
Other interventions by the federal government include construction of more hydropower plants, with 700 megawatts Zungeru hydroelectric plant completed and concessioned, with others at various stages of completion. There are also plans by the federal government to resuscitate 26 abandoned mini dams across the country, while interventions in renewable energy and off-grid mini solutions are to be sustained.
The best way that electricity supply will improve in Nigeria at the moment, for a customer to see light when he switches on his switch, he sees light, is to have a combination of the different sources of power to bring it to bear. Like now is era of renewable energy.
On the challenge of gas supply to thermal plants, federal government says it is working on resolving issues of debt-owned gas companies and generation stations, while canvassing that payment of gas be made in naira instead of dollar.
As the goods and services are moving, are gravitating towards consumption. After consumption, the payment for it must also gravitate back to the players in the sector. Those that will handle delivery will be paid. That's distribution. Those that are handling transportation will be duly paid, which is transmission. Those that are producing will be paid. And the people producing also have raw materials as input. In this case, gas. So there's no stoppage or distortions to liquidity flow. But if we are only supplying and we are not being paid, there is a problem with the producer, which is the generator. If they are being owed, it will be tough for them to pay for raw materials to continue production or generation. So, in the long run, you might grant to grant zero.
While efforts to improve generation are yielding results, Nigeria continues to grapple with cases of grid collapse, often attributed to weak transmission network among other factors. But there seems to be end in sight as the process to acquire SCADA system and provide spinning reserve to stabilize the grid are in progress, in addition to interventions to upgrade and expand the transmission infrastructure. At the distribution end of the value chain, federal government says it will continue to invest in distribution networks despite privatization of the sector, as distribution companies are being taxed to step up or step out. With more money injected into the sector and the new law, electricity customers can only hope for improved and stable supply. Joshua Ojito.
Right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. Let me welcome to this program Engineer Umar Hashidu. He is the CEO, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. We're joined tonight by Engineer Okechukwu Ozoemena, the former executive director of the old NEPA, and he's a consultant on power generation. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, Phyllis. Good evening, Nigerians.
Right. Let me also welcome Uket Obongla, Network for Electricity Consumers Advocacy of Nigeria. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, and good evening, Nigerians.
Right. At some point in time, the program gets interactive. You can join in the issues being discussed in the studio, but when it's that time, we'll remind you of the process and the procedure. For now, let's begin to look at the issues here. And even as I speak on this program that's meant to look at power supply and the initiatives to bring Nigeria to that level, I can say without any fear of contradiction that right now millions are probably watching this program by virtue of turning on generators and things like that, and so many areas would still be in darkness. So let's start from the premise of looking at how generation distribution, in other words, how is electricity supply in Nigeria today?
Good evening, everyone. The supply of electricity in Nigeria, it's as a crossroad, I would say, because there are challenges right now, most especially due to the constraint of gas. However, historically, looking at Nigeria as a whole, the highest ever generation we've had is 5,615 megawatts, which was achieved in March 2021. For a nation of 200 million people or more, I think collectively we could say this is not optimal, this is not right. The premise or the issues are multifaceted, both from the generation, the transmission, and the distribution, and I would say the customers as well. I think we need to have a national consensus as to, do we really need power? Is power really critical to our national development? And that is the conversation we need to all have collectively and say, if that is the case, then what must we do? Both in terms of those people that actually generate, transmit, and distribute, and then the end user customers. And how do we make sure that we power our nation? Because industrialization is key to this national growth, is key to us moving forward as a nation. And there I say, as someone who's been in the sector for about a decade now and actively playing in it as a CEO of a distribution company, we have our part to play significantly. But I think the conversation has to go around this table and to the country.
So I like that, because you can say the answer to that question you raised would almost be 100% in the affirmative. But let's come to Engineer Okechukwu Ozoemena. Nigeria went from ECN to NEPA, to PHCN, and now to so many companies. In fact, at some point in time, there are those who would say they're confused about the number of companies that have come out of what used to be known as NEPA, then, or PHCN. We talk about bulk purchasing, GENCOs, DISCOs, the regulator, from Transmission Company of Nigeria, and so many others. But it's still a long way off, isn't it?
Yeah, Cyril, I think the Nigerian power sector has really gone through transformation, very, very deep and light transformation for quite a long time. I'll start from the premise that to be able to solve a problem, you need to identify the cause of the problem. And going down memory lane, by the year 1999, it was considered that generation was really the problem of power supply in Nigeria. Because at that time, the generation level was at decimal low of about 1,900 megawatts from all the power plants. 1,900 megawatts. Fortunately, the management of NEPA by 2003 shot up power generation to 4,500 megawatts. It's on NEPA records, which this year should have today. So when people are talking of 4,000, 5,000 megawatts today, it baffles me because this was what was achieved since 2003. However, when NEPA management achieved that level of power generation in 2003, 2005, that was when it was discovered that generation was not really actually a problem of power supply in Nigeria. Because each time we got to 3,500 megawatts, the transmission and distribution network wouldn't take anymore. That's when it was discovered really that the transmission and distribution infrastructure was not in good state. And at that time, we now thought that something had to be done about transmission and distribution network. And I think the government then, it was Obasanjo was the president then. He really played a great role, to see that there was improvement in power supply because he began to invest money in transmission and distribution network and even generation. He, in fact, made available money for about 8 thermal power plants, gas power plants to be built at the Delta region, where the source of gas was. And these are the plants we call NIPP today, Niger Delta Power Holding Company. That's what Obasanjo did at that time to show power generation. So, indeed, I think the problem is power generation, yes, because for you really to be sure that you have a reliable and steady power supply, you should have at least 20% more of required power generation. If Nigeria needs 10,000 megawatts, you should have at least 12,000 available because of outages, for maintenance and all that. So he invested very much in power generation and also was spending money to rehabilitate and show up, a capacity of transmission and distribution network. And that's the way it was when the Reform Act, the NEPA Reform or the Electricity Power Reform Act came. NEPA management, by that act, was to split NEPA into the number of companies that were considered viable for operation. And we as NEPA management then split generation into 6 generation companies, transmission into 11 transmission companies, and then, of course, we thought that transmission shouldn't be split. We left it as one, Francisco, then. That was the beginning of the privatization problem. Privatization business. And the privatization itself, in my own opinion, wasn't the way the processes followed were not the best, really, because it was left for those who said they were going to be able to improve aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses within a very short time. And some of the companies claimed they were going to do it within a very short time, and eventually got, succeeded in either concerning or buying these companies. And from what we can see later, that wasn't just the best way to go.
All right.
Yeah, so that's the genesis.
Okay.
So maybe as the discussion.
All right.
goes
Well,
on,
we'll take a step further. And Uketu Bonga is a man that millions of Nigerians would like to, side with, because let's face it, what this is all about is being able to have enough electricity supply, either for domestic or industry purposes, right?
Right.
And that's not happening, is it?
Well, thank you very much, Cyril. The issue in the power sector and the way the governance space is managing or going about it, to some of us is embarrassing. We are not inventing the wheel. Electricity generation, transmission, distribution is not rocket science. The way we do things in this country, and electricity particularly, is that we are chasing after symptoms and not the root cause. There are three systems in the power sector: generation, transmission, and distribution. The face of the industry to the consumer is the distribution company. Now, we have installed generation capacity beginning from 2013 of about 10,000 megawatts, right? 10,000 megawatts. And as of today, we have installed generation capacity of about 13,000 megawatts. So we don't have issues so much with generation. But we have generation capacity, which the GENCOs and the operator, the regulator tells you is between 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts. Now, come down to available generation capacity, which is tied to the capacity of the transmission company to wheel or move to the distributor. And when it gets to the distributor, the capacity of the distributor to take in this load and push to the consumers. That is where we have the issues. Now, we continue going round circles year in, year out. We copied this. Let me take us back to history. In the early 20th century, the American government started Rural Electrification Agency. And before that, to open up rural areas for industrialization and development, they did what? They went into constructing networks, efficient networks, and make sure that meter manufacturing companies were giving loans to do what? Manufacture meters massively and meter every consumer. Other European countries followed thereafter. Come to Africa, Zambia. Before they went into privatization, they commissioned meter manufacturing companies who manufactured meters. They were not asking the natives, the citizens, to come and pay for meters. They were going house to house, service point to service point, to place meters. Why the meter? The meter is a revenue assurance tool that guarantees that what you generate, you are going to get the money. Who gets the money for the value chain? The other components of the value chain is the distributor. And if the distributor is not equipped, the distribution network is poor, you have high high losses in the sector if the distributor is poor. Today, we are talking of metering level of about 40, 42, 43%. And over 60 or 50 something percent of consumers are not metered. And you wonder what is wrong with us. And we're talking of liquidity in that setting. And nobody is really concentrating. I was, I think, in this business, in this studios on a Business Express, when I advocated that the federal government should take over customer enumeration, metering of electricity consumers. Because all the talk, what we are talking about the sector, oh, these ones cannot pay for gas, these ones cannot pay for this, we can't ramp up generation, we can't improve, upgrade network infrastructure, is tied to what? Money.
Okay, all right. Well, let's look at some developments that have happened in the sector now. Well, of course, when that huge step was taken to now put electricity on the concurrent legislative list, everyone felt, okay, this would be the answer to all those challenges. And it's about a year now, and we've also seen the inauguration of a privately owned generation company. How will that impact on all that we see in this industry? And what still remains the drawback? Because yes, the states can now join in, but again, we begin to wonder about the capacity.
Cyril, Nigerians need to understand this. Like Ukot said, liquidity is one of the key drivers of the sector. And why do I say liquidity is one of the key drivers of the sector? Because what happens is it allows for people to invest. It allows for everyone to know that what they have spent gets reimbursed. So be it the gas producers, be it loans from the banks and everything. But lastly, what we are doing, or what has happened in the 2023 Electricity Act, is that it gives opportunity for the states to actually partake in this. If you remember, for the distribution licensees, the federal government still owns 40%. And that 40% is owned largely by the state governments in those areas. So if you might say, for instance, if I would give an example with the disco that I manage, Kaduna State has a percentage, Zamfara State has a percentage, likewise Sokoto and Kebbi, in the distribution licensee. And I think a lot of the states are in the process of domesticating their own legislation such that right now they would be active sector players. I think some states have done. I know for Kaduna right now, the act is in the State Assembly. It's been going through the legislative process. So all of this are things that are coming into play together. And I'm sure they will actually yield result one way or the other in the sector. The reason why I say they will yield result is we're having that national awareness now, that national consensus, that national conversation. Because people go, I don't have light. But the cost of self-generation, everybody knows that. So the grid is the cheapest form of electricity that we can have here. So what is our role, both as a distribution entity and as customers, to say, how do we ensure that we pay our own fair share of this electricity, to allow for the gas companies to have gas, to allow for us to pay for the services of the transmission company and other ancillary services that are being provided by the market operator, the systems operator, the regulatory agencies and everybody. And how do we make sure, in the end, those people that invested in the power sector have a return on their own investment? Because that is the thing that is being missing here. Everybody wants power, but people are not willing to pay. Everybody wants, and I'm going to repeat this. And when you go, people will say, yes, we need to be metered. Granted, metering level is 44%. I'm sure we'll go in and talk about this because the presidential metering initiative is on course. And prior to this, if you look at it in 2018, between 2018 to date, we've added over 2.2 million meters, partly because of the National Mass Metering Program, partly because of the meter asset provider, and some of the metering that have been done by the distribution licensees. Yes, should we do more? Yes. Can we do better as a country in terms of metering? Yes. And in the last couple of years, I think meter manufacturers and assemblers have sprung up, which is really, really good. But the key issue is some of the FX denomination of bringing in these goods, some of those issues regarding the pricing.
It all comes back to that, right, doesn't it?
And a lot of all that. So I think we need to understand those criticalities for us to move forward.
All right, we do have a number of reports to go on with tonight's conversation. Let's take the first from those reports from different parts of the country. And we'll start off with Lagos.
Nigeria's economic development agenda requires regular power supply, which will serve as a catalyst for development. The 2023 electricity law, which places power on the concurrent legislative list, means states can now legislate and invest in the power sector. Apart from government, the private sector experts say can now fully make an inroad into the sector from generation, distribution to transmission. These industry players believe will hasten Nigeria's attainment of sustainability in the power sector.
And states can also do laws that are peculiar to their state that will help to leverage private sector investment in those states. And this continues. It means that there will be more quantum of people, private sector, that will come into the power industry, and that will spur competition and eventually reduce cost.
That will remove a lot of bottlenecks. The uneven tariff, the sharp practices, the difficulties that is faced by people in general.
Lagos, the commercial nerve center of the country, requires steady power supply to maintain its status as the fifth largest economy in Africa. And in realizing this, the state government is already exploiting the benefits of the electricity law with a robust legislative agenda and public-private partnership initiative.
We've been talking about how do we encourage investors to invest into this electricity market. And aside from that, training has been assessed even outside the country.
The power sector roadmap expansion, which is being funded by the Central Bank of Nigeria and executed by the Transmission Company of Nigeria and other critical partners, have gained a lot of traction in Lagos, while projects across various zones in Lagos are expected to be delivered this year.
So the project was supposed to be executed for 2 years. So we expect the final completion August 2024. They are the PMO office, that is the project management office, of which I'm privileged to manage or to coordinate. We are trying as much as possible to make sure we deliver this project before the set targeted date.
The stakeholders anticipate a more foreign direct investment in the power sector to address the power deficit in the nation. In Lagos, Joel Bukbola.
Lagos, we go over to Kanu for this next report.
Industry, small-scale and medium enterprises are the triple sisters that support the nation's economy, and both require steady electricity supply to flourish. However, insufficient electricity supply has continued to constitute major impediment to the growth of all these sectors. This company alone has created jobs to more than 3,000 employees, apart from more than 1 million indirect jobs. In addition, there are millions who are self-employed that also employ others and support their families. They all rely on electricity. This is the common ambience that comes with cost, in addition to sound pollution, which is why majority of the users welcome the recently signed Electricity Act 2023, so long as it will address the insufficient electricity supply regardless of the cost. This is the view of Muhammad Sunusi, who is into the business of printing, and this saloon operator, Saudat Abdul Ganiyu, among others.
It's more than what I'm going to do. So me, I prepare that electricity than this running that machine.
I prefer light than generator because when I have customer, if I own generator, so people will know that I have customer inside my shop. But if I have light, nobody to know that I have customer inside my shop. And for me, I prefer light than generator.
I can afford to pay 10 to 15,000 naira so long as there is constant electricity supply, which is cheaper than buying fuel. If we can have sufficient electricity, we will be willing to pay. What we don't like is insufficient supply.
From the business cycle, the new act is expected to promote competition among the various electricity generators, so long as states and private sector will participate.
A fantastic idea, but let the whole issue be tackled carefully, simply because we have to look into the other angle, especially the angle of inflation. But that if people can get more electricity, that will create more jobs.
They all agree that constant supply of electricity is key to achieving industrial growth, which has direct bearing on the peace and security of the nation. In Kano, Aminu Umar.
All right, would like to introduce another guest who's joining us via Zoom. I want to believe that he's set with us here. Yakubu Mohammed Katamba is the Managing Director, Niger State Electricity Board. He joins us via Zoom from Mina. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Series Toba, nice to have you. Good evening, all.
Right, you know, Niger is the power state with Kenji, Shiroro, and Jeba. It's an irony that when you talk about power, you wonder why the power state is most of the time powerless.
Good to have you all, and a very good evening to all of you. Series Toba and the other guests that are actually participating in this program. First, as the power state, Niger State being the power state, the new act, the Electricity Act that was signed into law by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a welcome development to us in Niger State, because the electricity sector, one of the first benefits that I think Nigerites are going to be happy with it is the liberation of this sector, which will allow Niger State as a state and as a power state to participate in the electricity industry. And it will give Niger State also the ample opportunity to also give opportunities to other investors who are actually interested in investing in electricity sector. This will go a long way, not only to a layman understanding, because if there's a problem of electricity in Niger State, an ordinary layman walking on the street, the only place that he is concerned is the Niger State Electricity Board, who are actually in charge of electricity, to a layman understanding. The ordinary man in the street is not even aware that distribution of electricity is actually the sole responsibility of the distribution company, just like the AEDC. Anytime there's a problem of power failure, even at this moment, this night, I've received several calls. Everybody is actually complaining that there's no light. And to an ordinary man who is actually walking on the street, he's not even concerned about who gets what and who is actually in charge. All they know, it is Niger State Electricity Board that is actually in charge of electricity, and all they want is Niger State Electricity Board should give them light. So I think this is an ample opportunity for Niger Light. This is an ample opportunity for other investors, because like today I had a meeting with some investors that are actually interested in keying into this new initiative of signing this bill into law that will allow even individuals to participate in the electricity sector. And it is an ample opportunity for even the state government to key in order to generate revenue. Before the signing of the law, there's a SPV that we have with a private company in trying to reduce the lack of electricity, even within the state capital. And I think with the signing of this law, the Electricity Act 2023, it has given us an ample opportunity to go beyond signing an SPV to generate electricity. Not only to generate, but also to distribute. I have had the conversation with other speakers, the last speaker who spoke. I think it is important for us to really understand the issue of metering, which everybody is actually crying over the years. Even now that they are talking about the meter is actually available, but how many people can even access the meters? Even if you eventually pay the money for the meters, that is one. Secondly, you see, we are trying to address so many issues. The state government at the moment is overhauling all the transformers in the state. And by the time you finish repairing or overhauling all these transformers, you will take it back to AEDC network. AEDC will say it is her own property. So what is the state having as the stake to all these kind of problems that we're facing? But if today there's going to be liberation of this market, if Niger State government is using a very huge amount of money to overhaul this injection substation that is within the state, I think there must be a roundtable discussion between the distribution company. What stake is the state having? But eventually the state is actually investing in most of the injection substations that we're having, because I was in a community about a week ago, a Somfada community in Lapai local government. They have been off the national grid for 22 years. And ordinarily, this is not supposed to be the responsibility of the state. It is supposed to be the responsibility of the distribution company, who are the revenue generating entity, that are supposed to take transformer to this very community. A community that has suffered without electricity for 22 years, until the request came to my table and I have to intervene. So you see, this is just part of some of the problems that as a state we've been facing. And I think to us, just like the telecommunication network has been liberated, an ordinary man on the street is happy with this development of allowing state, private sector, and individual to participate in the electric sector. And this will go a long way in not only generation, but even distribution of electricity. But because you have an option to select from A, B, C, and D, which network is going to serve you well, and which network are you actually going to patronize. So I think us as a power state, we have suffered a lot. Even aside the Shiroro that we're having, the Kayenji Dam, even the last one that has been privatized, that is the Zingeru hydropower station, that is yet to take off. I think this is an opportunity for even the state to key in, either directly or indirectly, because we cannot be hosting about four dams as a state, and we don't have a stake on it.
All right. Thank you so much.
This is an opportunity for us to participate very well.
Thanks for being with us, because I'm going to return to you shortly with one or two other issues, but it's good to have you join us. Just stay with us and I will return to you. But Yes, as he was speaking, Uket was about to cut in here. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, the fellow from Mina, Niger State.
Yeah, that's
he
Yakubu
talked
Mohammed
of
yes.
the state government investing in the distribution infrastructure. And I want him to know that there is a regulation, which is now part of the Electricity Act. It is called Regulation on Investment in Electricity Infrastructure in Nigeria. Chapter 2 of that regulation, Section 7, Sub 2 of the regulation, talks about non-licensees investing in networks owned, managed, maintained by the licensee. And the licensee here is Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. And subsection 2, I think H, talks about the non-licensee investing in the network of the licensee, entering into project agreement with the owners of the license, the owners of the network, on how their investments will be recovered.
Okay.
So my advice to him is that he should approach NEC for that regulation, or contact us. We'll make it available to him and guide him on how to get AEDC to enter into investment agreement. Because as I say, subsection, I think H, it talks about refund of this money through amortization or direct payment.
Okay. All right.
That's my reaction.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I think we are actually discussing ensuring stable electricity supply.
Yes.
And I want to make suggestions, my opinion, and I will take it in according to what I think should be done in the three sectors. In generation, for instance, we've been told that we have 12,000 megawatts capacity. That capacity may not be available. That is very clear. I recently undertook technical audit of 5 power plants, and you'll be surprised to know that many of them don't have gas. They don't have the gas, even though the machine is there. So I think something has to be done to make sure that gas becomes available for these power plants. That's about gas. Very importantly, we must have good energy mix. It's not just a matter of thermal power plants, gas. We need hydropower plants. We need solar power plants. We need wind turbines. We need clean energy, you know. So my suggestion is, I think Nigeria should do everything it can to bring to fruition Mambila and this other one you just mentioned, Zungeru. Make sure they come in. Because if we have Mambila and Zungeru, up north of Nigeria, we'll have nearly 6,000. 2,000 from Jeba, Shiroro, and Kainji. About 1,900 something. 700 from Zungeru, and 3,050 from, that we'll be talking about nearly 6,000 megawatts for the north. Down south, of course, we have more than that. If that is possible, then we can curtail problems with transmission company, because these system collapses we experience from time to time is one of the biggest problems that the system has, because each time there's a collapse, it takes quite a lot for the system to come back.
There are about 14 of such.
It takes a lot for the system to come back.
Last year alone?
Yes.
And I understand there have been one or two this year.
So for as long as we have one grid, which is what we have in Nigeria today, we'll be experiencing these collapses that takes out the whole nation into darkness. In 2004, NEPA split the system, the grid, into two. I was part of this, north and south. The thermal power plants were limited to supplying power to the south, and the north was limited to being supplied from the hydros. And there was no system collapse for a long time. The only disadvantage then was that we had more power in the south, so the north was more or less, shortchanged. But with Mambila and Zungeru coming, the north we had so much power. So we should split the grid.
Engineer, but the issue is, it's beyond that, just splitting the grid. The issue is, yes, when you have generation at 3,500, it's very difficult to manage the grid. Why do I say it's very difficult? You have a demand pool. People, when people go to their homes, they just switch on the light. As soon as you have that demand pool, naturally what should happen is generation should come up. But it doesn't. When it doesn't, what happens to your frequency?
Yeah, why doesn't it come up? That is the problem.
Explain this to us, if you will.
Okay. Right. So basically, what happens is, I'll use the normal analogy, so for the average Nigerian to understand. Can I use the analogy of a generator?
Just go ahead so that
when you go home and you switch
seeming mysticism surrounding
so basically these Gencos are just generators, just like your normal generator. So they're turbines, large power generations, gas. When somebody demands electricity, which is from an end user, it goes right to the transmission, pulling power. So the generators should be on and should give you power. And when demand surges up, what happens? There should be more generation kicking in to meet up to the demand. When it happens, that's fine. When it doesn't happen, you have two options. Either you let the generators go to our ground, which is what happens in your normal generator. You see, when you put up more load than it can take, it goes vroom, vroom, and then goes off. Or you switch off the light, which is what the systems operator does, and then your generator is stable. So that is what happens. So at every constant given time, that is what this grid operator, which is the system operator, is trying to do. Maintain generation and demand. So demand and supply. And that equilibrium is what they need to do at any given. That's why sometimes you see your light goes off intermittently and then comes back on and off. We don't even have control over that.
Right. So you see, so if you say to me that you're doing maybe 5 to 6 1,000 megawatts, and you
at 5,000 you wouldn't have those collapses, but now we're around 3,000.
Right.
And that's the major issue. That's the challenge, because it is highly unstable at this level.
Yeah. So as I was saying anyway, so we need good power mix. Right now, we depend solely on thermal power plants and some hydro power plants. We need the mix, as I said. And we
Solar,
also need,
wind
we don't need to run our grid as one. We don't need to do that. No country runs one grid. But there's connection. When you have different grids, there's connection. So you can link them if the need arises, You see, when you lose a major power plant or a major transmission line, that's when the system collapses. That's when the system actually collapses. It's not just the ordinary demand of customers. It's when you lose major grid line or major power plant. Anyway, as I said, also, there's something that Nigeria is not looking at all, which I don't consider right. We are all scared about use of fossil fuel. We don't want anything that will pollute ozone layer, will perform ozone layer, and will cause climate change. We don't want
a
all
signatory to many international conventions now.
But one thing is very certain. The world, most of Europe and America, stabilize their power supply through coal-fired power plants. They are retiring them now, yes, gradually. When they bring in new power plants, the clean energy power plants, they take out the coal power plants. It's going to last for a very long time. The average life of a coal power plant is 25 to 30 years. And if Nigeria has coal power plants today, I'm telling you the world will still be using coal power plants, retiring them gradually in the next 25 to 30 years. So Nigeria needs such big power plants, because when we talk of solar and the wind and all that, it doesn't give you that chunk of power. It doesn't give you that so much power like you get from the fossil fuel. So that's let me leave that for generation. For transmission, I think good work is being done so far to strengthen the transmission infrastructure. I think government is spending.
All right. Let's come to this. And there have been so many arguments about this. Yes. And the point of privatization. Yeah. A lot of companies came in. And today, some say a number of them didn't have the requisite competencies in this field. But they bought. They turned around and accessed funds because they couldn't immediately bring in funds to upgrade the system. Yeah. Now that happened, and still some of those companies, then there were the issues they had with banks. That was when Nigerians started to take a second look at who bought what and who was, and it was so clear that people didn't have the knowledge. Everyone just thought, okay, you could just buy up the plants and then go sit back and make money. And of course, power is still so very expensive. Now, we hear talk about subsidies. And there are a lot of Nigerians who say, where is the subsidy?
Okay, so currently the tariff is around averagely 58 naira per kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. If you actually apply the true cost of electricity today, where tariffs will be around 180 naira per kilowatt hour, mm-hmm. or close to 200.
And what is the
composition?
Exactly.
So, for example, your gas prices. So, domestic gas obligation for gas to power is $2.80 per scoff. You have 80 cents for transportation. So that's that. You have the other cost of running and maintaining the plant's operations and maintenance, so that forms the generation cost. You have a transmission cost, which is about 7 naira per kilowatt hour that goes onto it. And then you have the distribution cost element as well. So when you sum that up, and a return on investment for the licensees and the investors, that is what gives you the cost of electricity.
And I would also want you to take into consideration what's the GDP? Country. And in simple terms, how many Nigerians as of today can afford this calculation that you've just made?
Exactly. So to me, there's a correlation between GDP per capita and access to electricity. The more you have access, the more you use electricity, the more you actually be productive, and you get something out of it, and you lift yourself out of poverty. So that's one angle. So that's why, if you remember earlier, I said we need to have a national conversation about this. We need access, one. We need it to be affordable for industrialization. We need to have electricity in our homes. So all of this are. So to me, when you talk about either having subsidy or reducing the cost, just saying, okay, yes. What is, on the other hand, the GDP correlation to it in terms of how it affects, and then what is 1.2 trillion as a subsidy maybe to the sector today? So if you have a 3% or 4% GDP drop because of lack of electricity, which might happen, then the issue would be different. So I think to us, we need to make that determination.
All right.
And I feel electricity is something that actually should be considered vital for national growth.
Let me go quickly back to Yakubu Mohammed Katamba in Mina. If you're still with us. Right. You know, as I said earlier on, all this conversation is just about one thing: the consumer, either for domestic or industrial purposes. And for those who were around during the military era, and some of us think about this with some nostalgia, and I'm talking particularly about Niger State. There used to be a sticker back in those days, says, "Will the last Niger light on earth please switch up the lights?" How soon can we return to that? And because that tells you what supply was in the power state. And maybe you would remember that too, I suppose.
Mr. Cyril, I think the drive at which the governor of Niger State is actually taking the state, we're very optimistic that we'll go back to the military era where this has been said in a very long time. The governor is actually on his toes to make sure, like I've said earlier, bringing investors, because the state cannot do alone, to make sure they invest in the electricity sector. And like I've said earlier, is an ample opportunity for us as Niger State, for other investors, because of the potentials that Niger State is having in terms of hydropower dams, to come to Niger, aside the dams that you already know, the Shiroro, the Kainji, and the Zingeru dams. There are other dams that are actually good for other, for grids, just like this discussion is ongoing. So I think the potentials that Niger State is having is enormous. And like I've said earlier, the drive at which the state governor, Farmer Omar Mohamed Bago, is carrying is something that we're very, very optimistic in the next, at most 2 years, Niger State will really reclaim that name of Niger State being the power state. We're actually on our toes. The state governor is actually on his toes. We're actually having conversation with individuals. We're having conversation with investors. We're having conversation at the state level. While the state is actually going to key into this new drive, there are a lot of investors that are actually interested in coming to Niger State to invest in the electricity sector. And there are other individuals that are even interested in mini-grid. We're also having discussion with AEDC, in partnering with AEDC to key into their franchise of either doing the integrated mini-grid that is going to solve some of the power problems that we're having in the state. So our hands is spread across so many areas to ensure that these components, this electricity, this name of power state, will reclaim it in the next 1 or 2 years by the special grace of God.
All right. Well, at this point in time, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have 1 or 2 other reports, but more importantly, the phone lines will be open, and that means you can join in the conversation in the studio. So stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation.
My advice to these young people is, please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Right. Thanks for staying with us on this segment. At the appropriate time, the numbers to call will be on your screen. You can join in the conversation. We say this every Tuesday. If you're calling in tonight and your call gets through, do us a favor. Turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we also encourage you to go straight to the point. Keep it short and simple. And not to worry too much about the greetings. Just a simple hello would be appropriate. So let's start off with another of our reports. Let's take this one from Enugu.
Power supply in Nigeria has been persistently unstable despite the privatization of electricity in 2013. The country's power sector currently generates and supplies between 3,500 megawatts to 4,500 megawatts of electricity to a population of over 200 million people. No doubt, industries, businesses, and other economic ventures cannot operate at maximum level without constant and stable power supply. It is against this backdrop that the federal government, in a resolve to ensure steady electricity supply, adopted the Electricity Act 2023, which provides a holistic, integrated policy plan that recognizes all sources for the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. Key players have commended federal government gesture in liberalization of the power sector and called for the enabling environment for its implementation.
Government has tried a lot to liberalize the power sector.
Investors are expected to come in. People that are into modular power generations can come in and play. Wind farm, solar farms, these are alternative sources of power, clean energy.
At the subnational, the 181 megawatts geometric power plant in Aba, Abia State is one of the moves to meet the required megawatts for stable electricity supply. Key players say the move will accelerate power supply to industrial clusters in the region. On the latest move for the removal of subsidy in the power sector, future of gas and hydro-driven energy to boost supply across the country, debate on electricity tariff, as well as reasons behind the frequent collapse of the national grid. Some residents have this to say.
With the rise in cost of living, how many people can feed themselves and transport themselves and still be able to pay for electricity if the subsidy is removed? That is where I'm looking at.
Liberalizing the source of supply as well as the source of production of power will help us. Increasing tariff is not easy.
There are many reasons that can be attributed to the collapse of the grid. There was a time it was as a result of vandalism, the TCN tower that was attacked by the insurgents affected the grid and the grid collapsed. Sometimes under frequency, that's when the quantum that is generated is not enough to sustain the grid. It can cause the grid to trip.
Enugu state government on its own has unveiled a transition plan from an energy poor state to a commercially viable electricity market, generating over 690 megawatts of electricity and at least 20-hour per day power supply by 2030. The move is in line with the urgency of the state to take advantage of the legal framework by the federal government to achieve its targets. In Enugu, Chidi Okrafo.
Next is this report from Niger State.
That is the sound at virtually every commercial vicinity you go in Mina, the capital city of Niger State, as the use of generators as source of power has become one of the options for business owners. Residents and business owners in the capital city are lamenting recent shortfall in electricity supply in the metropolis.
Since early this year now, the electricity is very, very poor. It affects our business in a lot of ways. The only gain that we're supposed to get, we are using to buy fuel every day. At least a day, we bought a fuel like 10,000 at least in a day now.
For some months now, we're having unstable light, and it's seriously affecting us, especially we, the hand workers. Because if we don't work, there's no how we can eat. And sometimes you just see the light like 30 minutes, almost 2 hours, before you know it, the light will still go off again. In a day? In a day.
The moment Bago came in, we discovered that we enjoying the light. We discovered that maybe the thing is not functioning again. We cannot compare generator with light issue. And most of the time they used to come to us, they charge us, pay our light bill, we pay.
This is happening in the state despite hosting 4 hydroelectric dams with the 700 megawatts Zungeru hydroelectric power station on board, giving them a combined capacity of more than 2,500 megawatts of electricity. A source at the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, who prefers to be anonymous, attributes the low supply of electricity in the state to lack of corresponding supply from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. Even though efforts to get response from the TCN and the hydroelectric stations in the state yielded no result, low power generation by the hydroelectric dams is speculated to be responsible for the drop in electricity supply in the state. An electrical engineer, Professor Jacobs Ado, however, says lack of transparency and human factors in the power sector are responsible for the situation at the hydroelectric dams.
So if government has strong policy that will guarantee the gas companies that, oh, this volume of gas or this quantity of gas is supplied to the company, that they will be paid. And also these generation stations, they also have the guarantee that, oh, if I use this gas to generate so amount of power, that you will be able to have a transmission company that will evacuate this power.
The state government is going to create an agency that will regulate transmission, distribution and generation of electricity in Niger State. But at the moment, before a state can start generating, transmitting and distributing electricity, it must enact its own state law, state electricity market law. And Niger State government is working round the clock to enact that law.
Similarly, the ongoing AKK gas pipeline project from Ajakuta in Kogi State to other parts of the northern Nigeria, Niger State inclusive, will hopefully enhance electricity supply in Niger State and the country at large. Emina Mukhtar Wu.
Now let's take this other report from Uyu.
Akwa Ibom State, being one of the oil-rich states in the country, boasts of abundant gas for power generation. Effort by the previous administrations in the state to utilize this abundant gas resource to boost electricity supply led to the establishment of the Ibom power plant that has been generating about 191 megawatts of electricity into the national grid. Yet, not much is on the ground in terms of steady power supply to residents of the state, a situation that is largely blamed on collapsed infrastructure and inadequate gas supply. Following the liberalization of the power sector through the Electricity Act 2023, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission approved the application of the state government for the Ibom Utility Company to operate as an independent electricity distribution network.
Generate, distribute. Will they, though the law is there, what about some of those bottlenecks? Would they be able to dismantle some of those things and then unbundle the system so the system can run on its own?
When there is competition, the companies will sit back and they will improve in their services.
Among residents of Uyo, the debate on high tariff and payment for what is not consumed continues.
The current tariff we are paying, I'm talking about the billing system, we are paying in this country as a people, yet we do not even have that light to say, yes, we are paying for what we are consuming. Certainly not. And someone is still talking about removing subsidy, if there was.
If you remove the subsidy from the present in the logistics sector, that means Nigeria is back to the experience that we have.
Please let the federal government not give heed to some of those advice. They are ill advice just to destabilize the system. So let the system continue on. Let the government continue to pay those small subsidies. After if you look at even the subsidy that we are talking about, there are some people that are paying as much as 40,000 naira a month.
Addressing frequent collapse of the national grid through quality infrastructure, metering and full liberalization, according to the respondents, are among the ways out of the present electricity challenges. Clement Barikui.
All right. So we've seen these reports, and now we're back to the studio, and hopefully the calls will start coming through. So I guess can address the issues. And the biggest question here is, after privatization, and it was discovered that people didn't have the competencies, those who bought up all these plants didn't have the competencies to run them, and that was also part of the problem. So going forward, what can be done? Now the states can be players in this industry. and with the benefit of hindsight, the knowledge that some people have gone into what they know very little about. How do we improve this system?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
you want to?
The investors have really violated the terms under which they were given these facilities. It's in the terms of contract that each company stated the number of meters it would install within certain time. That was one of the bases on which they were given these contracts. Also, they were to keep all the staff, 100% of the staff for 6 months. That's the staff they inherited from PHCN. They were to keep them for 6 months. 1 year. After which they can decide who to go and who to keep. But most of them came in and just started terminating the appointment of most of the experienced staff, probably because they didn't want to pay good salaries, and began to employ people who didn't know much about the system. And so there was no way they could perform. Unfortunately, NEC, which was supposed to be regulating and checking that the conditions were kept, didn't do much. NEC didn't do much. So in my opinion, I think the moment NEC or government decides really that these investors either do the right thing or return the facilities back to government, the earlier the better.
Well, the calls have started coming through. We have Ada calling in from Jos. Hello. Hello. Right. Okay. Ada, are you still there? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, yes, Ada. Calling from Jos State.
Go on.
I'm so happy that the power sector has been liberalized now. And so this gives room for the governors to now think outside the box to light up their respective states. No more excuses. We should move away from this feeding bottle economy. The importance of power can never be emphasized. I don't think the problem of Nigeria is the tariff. If we are having the supply, anybody who has used generator, we know that there's no amount of tariff they will ask us to pay that will be much more than what we are using to go by generating, especially those who like to manufacture and the rest of them. So I think the problem is that whatever they want to do, let them look inwards and look at the things that are available within their respective states. We have solar, coal, nuclear, biomass, wind, hydro, and just, to mention a few. So all these things can be used to generate power. And then again, we must work towards having an indigenous meter as electronic industry if we want to point ahead as a nation with regards to the power sector. South Korea and Japan achieved this by doing such. So the problem, let it be done properly. Let people, everybody be meter. This idea of explained village, I don't really understand it. Then I want to find out for the guest. I was taken aback when I saw a streaming headline that the villa and then some military whatever were owing a billion of naira. And I just wonder what kind of meter were they giving. But I thank God for the border people, correct the narrative by making sure it has been paid. I read that it's a bill that has accumulated over the years. So what's happening? And then the army, I commend the army boss. They didn't go and intimidate the people. And then because I was surprised. The people had the guts to go and even disconnect them.
If not disconnected.
So it's a lot of development that they behave like Democrats, So they can continue. So no matter who is running, they are not paying you. How can they survive? That's the problem with Nigeria. We have to be disciplined. Well, it's a better for Nigeria. I might do get better.
All right. Thank you very much, Ada. Right.
All right. If I may say, the question you asked when people bought these entities, to me, what's the solution?
Right.
That's what we should be thinking. So you have people that have bought equity with equity and debt. These debts or these entities are by the companies that own this discourse. To me, I think what needs to be done is you could take the debt and put it onto the entity. So that debt is now sitting on the distribution licensee. So the people that bought it now, what is left of their equity? You determine that. And then you take that and say, okay, this is the level of investment required, both in metering, in infrastructure, in human capital development and everything. You take that. You say, new people, come and do this investment. And with that, you're going to have some stake in this. And the stake, you now take those debt from those distribution licensees, and it's now on the disco. You spread it over 10, 15, 20 years. From the dollar-denominated loans converted to Naira, and then it gets put onto the tariff. And then you keep paying over time. What that does, sir, is allows new players to come in. Those people that bought this asset have de-risked it to some certain level. So you don't want them to just go out empty-handed and then continue.
Okay, back to the phones. We have Solomon calling in from Port Harcourt. Hello. Right. That call's dropped, so skip the calls coming through. Another aspect that we need to look at is a lot of consumers are worried about, even those that are metered, they're worried about the kinds of bills, I mean, what they need to feed. In fact, some have resorted to calling those smart meters the unarmed bandits, because what they need to feed in there, I mean, people are wondering what criteria was used for the billing, especially where people are placed on certain bands, which by the terms of the companies say that they pay a certain amount based on the fact that they receive no less than 20 hours of uninterrupted supply. I'll tell you that there are many people who are paying on that band and they can't remember when they ever had 20 hours uninterrupted supply.
Yes, I said here that the extant multi-year tariff order that bettered the service-based tariff, which in turn led to the reclassification of consumers into customer bands, band A, band B, C, D, and E. And SBT, service-based tariff, is built on the premise, on the principle that the more hours of power is supplied to you, the more you should pay. For instance, I live in the local government axis of Abuja, and I am on band A, and my tariff rate is 81 naira 88 kobo. Now, the discos who asked for this committed to supplying or delivering to the consumers this service level of 20 hours for those on band A, 16 hours band B, 12 hours band C, 8 hours band D, and 4 hours band E. But now, for those of us who are involved and doing this in the field, reaching out, and I've done extensive work on this, I can tell you authoritatively that within Abuja here, not many, I can't say up to 5% of consumers in this level receive minimum of 20 hours.
Okay, I'll just ask you to pause a while here. Yeah. We'll take this call and then you get back to that issue. It's extremely important. John calling in from Bielsa. Hello. Turn down the volume of your TV set, John. Brad, are you with us now? Have you done that? Hello, John from Bielsa. Are you there? Okay. You were making a very important point. Right.
But Section 14 or 13 of the current, the extant MITO provides for, and let me paraphrase it. It says where the distribution company fails to deliver on the committed hours or service level which is 20 hours minimum in a day, for a period of 60 days. He said, upon verification by the commission, the customers so affected shall be retroactively adjusted to the level.
There are millions who would be ready to take that step.
Last year, we conducted a research on this, on some hotels. Before this time, I carried out a forensic audit on 122 hotels within Abuja under Hotel Owners Forum Abuja, HOFA. What is the findings? Most of the hotels we investigated, I think 2 or 3% of them had something close to between 18 and 19 hours of supply. Particularly some hotels that you find in 12 months, they never had supply of 50% of what the disco committed to. Yet, the consumers are paying on this tariff level. And the discos are smiling to the banks. AEDC has posted, for how many months now, between 12, 14, 15 billion every 30 days. Where do they get the money from? Okay. And this is because consumers are being made to pay. And that is why I called it a fraud.
Okay.
You can't do this to Nigerians.
All right, let's go back to the phone.
And nobody is even doing anything.
Okoro calling in from Port Harcourt. Hello.
Yeah, I'm Okoro Magodi from Port Harcourt.
Right, go ahead.
Yes. I want to find out why is it that for successive governments from Obasanjo till date, Nigeria cannot get it right concerning electricity distribution. That's my concern.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. That's the issues we are addressing here tonight. Right. So, quite a number of consumers would not have been aware that they can actually get reprieve. So, now that we're beginning to talk about it, people who are placed on those bans and know actually that they have not, by any chance, received supply for the agreed number of hours, can make a report about this and then seek to trigger that portion of what you just read to us.
Yes, it's enlightenment. And the onus is on the regulator.
Yes.
And of course, the discourse.
Yeah,
because
a lot of consumers don't know about this.
Yeah, they don't know.
And the discourse are quiet about it.
Consumer engagement is part of the tariff that is given to them.
Let me come in here.
Okay.
So the whole issue is...
Oh dear. Okay. Umar from Birnin Kebbi, we'll just take you quickly because this is so very important because, one of the things that's been said is that consumers are not paying. For those who are paying, they are paying what they don't really consume. Umar from Birnin Kebbi, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cyril. I'm Umar Anacha, Tibia. You said it all. The people that are paying, they are really paying. And they need to show that they are paying. You see, the issue of light in Nigeria, it's just like the more you see, the less you apprehend. Let me tell you one thing. I saw one video that is paraded through the social media that the building was bombed deliberately. It was a confirmation. The minister set a panel to investigate and found out that there are a lot of saboteurs that sabotage the issue of building Kebbi, the issue of fire in building Kebbi, where transformers were burned deliberately. How can you assess that? And you think that Nigeria can volunteer and just fix that thing without punishing anybody? Those people need to be punished. They need to be punished. They need to be punished so that like people like them, they are out of the system. If not, if there is those kind of saboteurs, there is no way we can achieve anything in Nepal. May God continue to bless our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umar. Yes, back to you, Engineer.
Okay, if I may answer the issue about service-based tariff. And if you look at it, what led to having an SPT first is the fact that there is not enough supply to go around in the country. That there is no cost-reflective tariff. And you don't want to overburden some of the most vulnerable within the community, the society. So you said, the more you get, the more you should pay. And that should actually translate into. So some of the reasons why distribution licensees are not able to meet the service level commitment could be a generation shortage. Sometimes it could be local faults. I understand. So when it is established that the DISCO has not met it, I'm sure the regulator, you would see, in the last couple of months, we've had fines, we've had a lot of things that have gone onto either the distribution licensees or the GENCOs or even to TCN. And they've applied fines to us, they've applied fines into our subsequent revenue earnings. And without a shadow of a doubt, and I think you would testify, these regulators have been almost the best set of regulators we've had in Nigeria. They've actually looked at most of these issues and are addressing all the challenges as they come. I'm not sitting down holding brief for them, but this is the reality, sir. And I think, as you're saying, DISCOs are doing their utmost, as much as they can, to ensure they meet this criteria, to meet these service levels. If this energy is flowing, no one does. We can't hold this power. This power can't be stored. It's a potential. It has to go out there. And I would like to crave the indulgence of Nigeria. I'm holding brief for a lot of the DISCOs here because I am a distribution licensee, to say that we don't intentionally not give power to Nigerians. Sometimes it is beyond our own circumstance. And for the caller that responded in terms of the fire incidents in Birnin Kebbi and saying there's a deliberate sabotage, I think people need to get their facts right. It was on a TCN substation that happened, and fire incidents, it could be due to protection relay or any other thing, but no one, please let's make that correction, no one in TCN or anybody makes a deliberate attempt to burn a transformer that cost almost $1 million. Let's get that clear, honestly. Okay. Thank you.
We have Mohammed calling in from Abuja. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed. I'm calling from Abuja. Yes, the problem of NEPA, or what we call power in this country, can only be tackled when we are sincere.
Yes.
Like in my area, there was a kind of outrageous billing until I contacted the AEDC and they advised me to buy meter. After that, I came to realize that there is serious sabotage in the system. Imagine right now I'm using like 6,000 to 7,000 naira in a month. As I get 19,000 to 20,000 naira before. No lights, but they were just billing people unnecessarily. People are tired. The metering system is very, very key if we must get the power sector right in this country. And that is my submission.
All right. Thank you very much. Right, and just as we're on the subject of clarifying the issues of Birnin Kebbi and the fires that was talked about, There's also the other aspect, anyway, which is real, where terrorists go and deliberately bring down towers. This is happening in the northeast, and this plunges that part of the country into darkness. That's another thing that has to be looked. So even the security situation has a bearing on the power distribution as well.
Apart from terrorists, you remember the Odukpani incident of last year, where vandals, vandalized some towers, I think 2, that brought down and even caused grid instability, grid disturbance, vandalization is another problem we have.
I was the MD of Yola Disco. Right. And for 2 years, for a year and a half, there was no power in Maiduguri because of that. See, these incidences or this are something that I think we need to have, like I said earlier in the beginning, national consensus. Do we need power? What are we to do? I know that individuals cannot secure themselves against certain level of bandits, but at least we can do certain things within our communities. And all of us must hold on to ourselves onto account that these assets do not only belong to the power companies, but are assets that actually really should be community-based assets. And I think this is where the act comes into play now, with state governments having ownership, and then all the other things. I think it will be a community-based approach towards solving the problem.
Right. Ibrahim is calling in from Bida, Niger State. Ibrahim from Bida, go ahead.
Mr. Cyril, good morning.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
All our discussants, good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Mr. Cyril, frankly speaking, like the last caller from Abuja pointed out, we, the consumer, are the end users of the whole issue discussed presently. And the major problem we are facing is estimation fee. Frankly speaking, if every household in Nigeria metered, the system will be very clean. There will be sanity in the system. But the AET system, who are concerned here, they do believe that with this metering, it's like most of them will be out of job. That's why they don't want to meter house, number one. Secondly, as the end user, we don't have much problem with generation and transmission company. The people we know are the distribution company. We pay for them, and on monthly basis, the bill keep on increasing, and we don't get the exactly what we pay for. Like in Bida now, frankly speaking, we don't get more than 3 to 4 hours like every day, 24 hours. And you see outrageous billing like 25,000, 20,000, and the AED system are very aggressive. When they come at the end of month for disconnection, and what they normally do, you will see the actual amount typed on the bill, 10,000. They will use pen and writing and write 25,000, 20,000 naira. No matter how you talk to these people, even if you have half of this money to pay, they don't listen to you. They will end up disconnecting you. When you go to their office and pay this money, they will end up giving you wires that are joined all over, all through. Maybe they disconnect a very neat wire from your phone. The wire they will give you is very painful, Mr. Siri. I don't know what's the problem. So we are calling on AET, please, we are begging. Because if it's not forum like we don't have places to take our complaints to. Let them be on their tools. We are paying, and whatever problem we face, they are the ones we do. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. And since you're mentioning all these challenges, and we have Yakubu Mohammed Katamba with us as well, speaking of the investments Niger State would be putting into the power sector, maybe a comment or two from him would help us out here in learning how to avoid these pitfalls that we have identified here.
I think I want to draw us back a little on the issue of a lot needs to be done by the regulatory agency and also the distribution company, because just like the last caller said, they don't have problem with the generation company and the transmission company. It's just the distribution companies they are actually having problems. And it is very, very sad. As a power state, we have day in, day out problem of power outage. And I think, like I've said earlier, this ailment of lack of electricity that is actually bedeviling us nationwide. I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has solved this problem by disbundling the electricity sector for everybody to participate in. And I think within the shortest period of time, there's going to be power supply to the barest minimum. But you know, electricity sector is capital intensive. And that is why, for the time being, us in Niger State, we're looking at how we're going to do marriage of a necessity because of the capital intensive nature of this sector. Even if we're starting with AEDC to key into some of their franchise where we'll have a stake as a state before investing fully in the electricity sector, we will do that because we cannot continue suffering as a power state and we don't have electricity 24 hours. It is seriously disheartening that in Niger State, even as I speak to you at the moment as I speak to you, there is no light in Mina. It is actually disheartening that as a power state, we're still complaining day in, day out that we don't have electricity. The last caller that spoke from Bida, he's saying the minds of an ordinary citizen who what he only requires is for him to see light and let him pay for it. Most Nigerians now are not even concerned about the tariff. Even if there is subsidy on power or there is no subsidy, what they want is for them to have 24-hour power supply and they will pay for it. And you see this conversation day in, day out of inadequate supply of power from the source, which is actually been coming up from the distribution company. And ordinary man on the street don't even understand all this. All he requires is for him to get light. So the discourse on the other side, they really have to sit up very well. They really have to sit up because aside even the distribution of electricity, you see most of the problem that is happening the moment you have problem, even on the network of the distribution company, the first point of call, an ordinary man who is actually running on the street, he doesn't even care whether it is the responsibility of AEDC to fix this network. Like in Gurara local government headquarters, they have been out of power for almost getting to 1.5 years. And it's just vandalization of the HT lines from that supply electricity from Shiroro transmission station to Gurara local government. And as a state, we're actually working around the clock, Niger State Electricity Board, to make sure they return Gurara local government headquarters to the national grid. Niger State government is investing nothing less than 10 billion naira this year on rural education and fixing other electricity infrastructure in Niger State. So where do we get our return of investment? If really we did not sit down and start this conversation on a really truly basis, because we cannot continue investing on electricity that we don't have a stake on it.
Right.
We are going to take it up as an administration to make sure that return of investment from the state on the dispose is returned back to the state as a source of revenue.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Talking about this high tariff issue.
Yes.
There's something many Nigerians do not know. From the beginning, when these companies were given out to the investors, federal government placed capex on the expenditure of any investor. For one reason, federal government said they don't want the tariff to be high. They don't want Nigerians to pay high tariff. So the investors were not allowed to spend as much as they would or they wanted to at the beginning. They placed capex on their spending per annum, just to save ordinary Nigerians from that kind of high tariff. I don't know what happened, whether NEC didn't do the right regulation or what. Nobody knows about that. Very importantly, please, I think the discourse also need to do some homework, because even within the organizations, in Abuja here, some of their staff malpractice. They sabotage their companies by, aiding people to steal energy and, reduce consumption. So they need to do something internally.
Can I say something about metering? And this, I know a lot of discos will tell you. I'll give you an example with my disco. There's a feeder that is 99.9% metered in Kaduna. But the loss level on that feeder is over 62%.
Yeah.
It means all those meters that people are saying, I need PPM, a prepaid meter, they go in and they bypass those meters.
But you say those are smart meters. You can't bypass them.
Some are smart. So you see, the question is, if you start saying there is a metering gap of over 60%. So some of the meters you found, if you start removing them to say you are replacing them, it becomes an issue. Because you don't have others, don't even have the meters, and you're removing and replacing others. So you want to cover as many people, and then some of those old meters have been tampered. And even the smart meters, as quickly as you're doing that, as you get a ping from somewhere that this person has bypassed, you will get another there and another there.
Two quick issues here, since we're on the subject of metering, and that's been raised by many consumers. I don't know if it's across board. There's a question that at some point in time, some of those meters will cease to function if they are not upgraded. And some people have paid so much as much as 70,000 and 80 to get those right. And then within a period, you say it's their responsibility to... Now, please explain this to many consumers.
Well, the issue of metering, the issue of billing, and the complaints by customers on estimated bills led to the introduction of regulation on capping, where the discos, now they do it on monthly basis. Yeah. They do it on monthly basis. Don't bill an unmetered customer beyond a certain level of selling. They don't go beyond. And that was an incentive created for the discos to meter customers in their various franchise areas. But the issue is that the discos don't have the money to do that. This we know. And this is the crux of the matter. The reason why today even discos go out of normal practices to do terrible things. As we speak, I'm coming back from University of Port Harcourt, where I was invited to assist the university on how to scale down on energy consumption. What did I find? I discovered that the MD meter that is mounted at the primary end, the primary load point of the transformer, and it goes even at 200 kV, 200 by 11, they are metering at the primary point against, instead of the secondary.
That's the problem.
Instead of secondary. Primary means the load that is coming in. Yeah. Secondary means what you are consuming.
Actual consumption.
So they put the meter here to record the load that comes in against the load that goes out, which is the...
But then who bears the transformer losses?
Now, who bears? Yeah. Who bears the transformer losses? For the discos, like Port Harcourt disco, for instance, the ATC and C losses is 35%.
Terrible.
35%. What is the meaning of that? If an invoice, say, of 5 billion is issued by the by NBET, NBET to the disco, those losses are calculated and 35% is taken out and they pay the balance. But now, you are metering the customer at the incoming load, the load that is coming in, not what he consumes, and you make him to pay 100% with no losses. The meter mounted at that proximity captures One, transformer losses and line losses. And these are the losses that...
no. It's only the transformer. No, I need to correct
No. The meter, the meter that is connected at the primary, this is an engineer, the meter that is connected at the primary measures transformer losses.
Yes.
And a percentage of the line losses.
No.
And this is the reason why they are giving this a percentage losses reduction from their invoices.
All right, let's hear you.
That's not true. Yes, it carries the transformer losses.
Yes.
Granted. Because that is a dedicated transformer. Who bears that?
Right.
That's one.
Dedicated transformer.
Yes. Chances are it's a 1 MVA transformer or even higher.
Go ahead.
That's
go
one.
ahead.
So I think, yes, it's for the university. So solely, and that point of correction must be made.
Okay, but the other aspect is, should this connection be the proper thing to do? Should it be that you put the primary?
I mean, there are people that you actually even meter from the grid.
Why is that?
Because someone has a dedicated feeder to that.
And this is a violation of the Nigerian Distribution Metering Code, Section 22, Sub 23. States clearly where these meters should be.
Okay, let's hear you.
It violates the provisions of the district, and you have not amended or reviewed the Nigerian existing metering code. Which is that?
Engineer, no. Let's be circumspect.
Let's hear you.
The reality is this: you have a dedicated line, and you have a dedicated transformer, and everything. By that, it means that entire entity,
right?
That power that goes into that belongs to you. So metering on the primary side or on the secondary side, the reason is because a lot of these institutions, whether government institutions, whether private institutions, is if you meter on the secondary side, you tell me, you know this, they always get bypassed. They always get shortchanged. This is the reality. But if it's metered on the primary side, it helps you, one, takes care of the transformer losses, because people get transformers that are really old, really bad. They don't service them, they don't put oil in them. And Cyril, please let me land on this. And so then I, as a disco, bears that losses. I mean, come on. So those are the things that needs to be understood.
Under what circumstances? You just finish that.
But then that's that on that. On the issue of metering, that I need to bring in here to say, there's been initiatives. In the last 3 or 4 years, over 2 million meters have been installed. Right now, the sector is working on a presidential metering initiative. There is the Meter Asset Fund, which is MAF, that has over 16 billion naira right now. And these are things that are going to be put in place for us to have a revolving fund for meters. But dare I say, the law must take its course on people that actually tamper with their meters. Honestly, there is need for that. There is need for us to look at that critically and
that
make energy theft.
But then, quickly, this is also on the part of consumers. And you're not supposed to contribute money to buy a transformer, are you?
No.
Would it surprise you that it's still happening?
Yes, it does.
Why is that happening?
That investment regulation by you see, Nigerians like to cut corners. It's simple. You want to invest. The regulation says, okay, it must be prudent cost, it must be agreed, and then you can do that, and you can get refund. Someone will be sat somewhere and somebody gives them the transformer.
All right, so something happens to the transformer, and officials from the distribution company come in and say, look, you're not going to have light for the next 1 year unless you contribute money and buy. And that is in breach.
Yes. No. I mean, I'll own up here. A lot of the discourse.
Let me say something about that. Why are Nigerians who have no business, who are not licensed to operate electricity, made to invest, procure transformers, procure poles, conductors, and set up lines? Recently, I think last year, George Disco, an assistant commissioner of police, retired, invested about 16 or 19 million to run a 5.2 kilometer line, right? The distribution company gave the approval. minus the section of project agreement with them. The man invested his money until he came to me and said, sir, this is what has happened. And then I brought the regulation and showed him. And I told him that I'm going to make sure that Just Disco refunded that money. And they refunded 25 million because I asked him to tender a bill, including interest rates of 33 million. We took up the matter. So, but how many Nigerians know that these regulations exist?
So then there's a problem with enlightenment.
Then, apart from that,
and then
the distribution companies themselves have failed in their primary responsibility to upgrade, expand, and invest in their networks. And now, Nigerians are helping politicians donate transformers. They give to them. There's a case I handled in Akura recently, where a community invested 12-something million naira, even in Port Harcourt. An institution of University of Port Harcourt invested about 7 million or 8 million. And now the distribution company is asking them to pay security deposit of 2.7 million before they can power that.
The issues cannot be exhausted tonight. But just quickly, we just need to be guided to say, look, should consumers contribute money to buy transformers?
No.
If the discos insist they do, who should they report such discos to? That's just what people need.
Reports, make a written demand to the distribution company. That is where you begin with.
Yeah, but they say, well, we don't have transformers.
They certainly would ignore it.
You pay
certainly
or you don't
ignore
get.
it.
And people
then
just want to get
escalate your complaint to the commission. As we speak, before I came here yesterday, an estate in Ikorodu, Lagos, has a similar issue. 2 transformers they invested on, 300. And Ikeja Disco is placing bottlenecks. They went and exhumed debts you were owing us. And this is a distribution company that is rejecting load, that is telling you that we cannot function and operate because of this or that money.
Our time is up here, and there's just one quick thing, if we might just quickly do that, Engineer Hashidu, and that's the argument that's been going on. Why give me electricity? Why supply me and ask me to sell to somewhere where I don't have the demand? Isn't it better for me to determine where I need to take it? And that argument has been on forever. Is there a way out of it quickly, maybe in 30 seconds?
I think what we need to, there is what we call universal coverage. Yes. At least people need to have some basic level of electricity. So that needs to be put clear, and we need to know that. We must do. But I need to say something. The cost of darkness is far greater than the cost of light.
Right. So I'm afraid we'll have to leave this conversation here. I always say that no one program can take care of all the issues, particularly when it's about power supply. We could spend the next 48 hours here and there would still be something to talk about. But for now, we must leave the conversation and say a big thank you to our guests. Let me start by saying thank you very much to Yakubu Mohammed Katamba, the MD, Managing Director, Niger State Electricity Board, who joined us via Zoom from Mina. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. And I tell you, we're looking forward.
Thank you for having me. Seriously.
We're looking forward to when
You're
we
also
will.
a Niger, right?
Yes, and that's why I am very particular about Niger reclaiming that position as the power state. Thank you so much.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Right. Thank you so much. All right. And a big thank you to Uket Obonga, the Network for Electricity Consumers Advocacy of Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm sure very many of those who watch this program will be seeking you out to advise them. And thank you so much, Engineer Okechukwu Ozoemena, a former Executive Director in the defunct NEPA, now consultant in power generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cyril. May God bless Nigerians.
And thank you so much, Engineer Umar Hashidu, CEO, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
And thank you, too, for being part of it, those who called in. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.
office everywhere and anywhere.